Again, Thaddeus, thanks for coming on here today. I'm really excited that we get to chat and learn more about yourself and what has made you successful. I've always been very impressed, and as you know, I viewed you as a mentor of mine. And what I've been impressed about is, one, at such a young age, you've been able to accomplish so many different things. And just the way you look at the food service industry and the companies within it, and how you can make your mark, it's truly profound. And I think it's what people aspire to be, but not a lot of people may be achieving right now. But today I wanted to just ask you questions and learn everything that I can about yourself and what makes you successful, and hopefully others can take nuggets away from that. So starting off, I know that you have a chemical engineering degree from the University of Minnesota. So tell me, how does a chemical engineer get into food service?
Wait, how long we have on this podcast? No, that's always. But first of all, thanks for the kind word.
Of course.
I've really enjoyed working with you over the past almost 10 years, or being around. I think it's something like 10 years,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed watching your career develop, and you
Thank you.
obviously have a lot of passion for what you do, a lot of energy. And like I asked you just before we started, when do you find time to sleep? But happy to be on the podcast today. It's the first video podcast I've done. So I was expecting you to send hair and makeup. I had to do it myself. So hopefully
that'll be for the part two.
okay. So getting back to your question, chemical engineer, it's kind of a long story, but I'll keep it kind of brief. I was able to kind of spin my chemical engineering background into kind of a non-traditional career.
Okay.
But basically, when I was a sophomore in college, I had a good, and this is kind of like the theme of my life, is I've always had somebody around me that kind of gives me a nudge in the right direction or steers me in the right direction.
Sure.
And so that was a good friend of mine in college who was heading up the career fair at the University of Minnesota, Fletcher Wanless, one of my best friends. And he's like, my freshman year, he's like, you need to come to the career fair. And I'm like, what for? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I ran into this booth, and it was this company called Procter and Gamble. And I was like, who's this? Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know who they were. And I was looking at all the products on the table, and I'm like, Tide, Folgers, Bounty,
Big brands.
stuff I'm pretty familiar with. I was like, maybe we should talk to these people. So they were like, who's this kid? I was like 18 years
Sure.
old. And so fortunately, I have the gift of gab from my father. I used to sit and play Nintendo next to his office, and he's in financials and sales and things. And that. So I think I absorbed some of that. But
Mm-hmm.
long story short, I ended up meeting a guy by the name of John Pacheco, Cheeks as I call him. And he was the head recruiter. Told him I'd be back next year, and sophomore year, I ended up getting an internship with Procter and Gamble,
Okay.
and it was on the engineering side. I actually worked on a product called Olestra, or you might know it as Aline, if you've ever heard of Wow Chips, the
I'm
fat-free
not
fat
familiar with that.
substitute. Well, you're too young to know what Wow Chips
Yeah,
are,
that's
but
true.
basically, it was an oil that you could fry like things in, but your body wouldn't absorb it, so there was no fat. So anyway, worked at Procter and Gamble there. Came back a second summer as an intern, and then was offered a full-time position in product development for Folgers. And I think they kind of didn't know what to do with me, because I wasn't really a traditional engineer. I was a little outgoing. Back then, I had my like boy band hair. It was like all spiky and blonde and stuff like that. It was not the conservative look you see today.
Sure.
But I think what they saw was that I was really creative. I could see things differently. And so they kind of threw me in skunkworks projects.
Okay.
I ended up on a project that was a self-heating beverage container,
Okay.
and it ended up doing really well in all of our concept testing, our use testing, and things like that. And at the end of the day, Procter and Gamble decided not to launch it. They went down the path of the Keurig single pod cup brewing and everything else. So I left to move forward with the team that basically raised venture capital to launch this product on their own, which is how I ended up in Southern California. It was a company called OnTech.
Okay.
And I mean, I was basically thrust into a business development role that I had no business doing as far as selling is concerned,
Sure.
but just started reaching out, cold calling, and things like that. And um, ended up meeting some people working on the retail side of the business. And that product was really well received by the U.S. military and places like Walmart and whatnot. And but we decided to part ways. And at the time, my mentor, Rick Bauman, who was actually brought into the company to really run sales, he left and went to another company called Kim and Scott's Gourmet Pretzels. And that's really where I got my first food service start. He basically called me and was like, hey, we need somebody that can just do top to top sales,
Sure.
meeting with big companies, with Starbucks. And at the time, Barnes and Noble Cafes, which was like a top 100
Of
restaurant company
course.
back in the day. Right. And
Of
so I
course.
came in and I didn't know anything about food service brokers like what you do.
Hmm.
I really didn't know much about distribution at that time. I didn't know anything. But I knew that I could really connect with people. And it was also my first venture into the better for you space
Okay.
because Tim and Scott's was a gourmet, all natural product. And back then, that was something that was relatively new. So we were competing with the likes of J&J Snack Foods with their, Super Pretzel and all that kind of stuff. But they had built a really solid brand around, they went direct to consumer on QVC.
Sure.
They were doing really well in retail. So we could play that brand into the food service realm. And so I just started going out and figuring out how to do it. I met some people that I would consider my mentors in food service, like Mark Eden,
Yeah.
from ASA Eden and Thai over on the
Yeah.
East Coast, and he looked at me and was like, this guy's got the right attitude. He knows he thinks he knows what he's doing, and let's work with him and try to really make this work. So he
Sure.
really taught me a lot more about the brokerage business and a lot more about distribution models and how challenging that is. And then I called a company called Dot Foods.
Yeah.
I didn't know what they did back then. A lot of people didn't know what they did either.
I know they've
And
come a long way.
yeah, so that's how I ended up in the food service world. Kind of long story short, but
Okay.
it was a weird path. But heck, I didn't want to be much of an engineer. I didn't want to be. I think in college, one of my professors said that don't go work in the oil industry because partial credit blows up the plant, and
Right.
that's basically what I was the king of, was partial credit on my exams. So
So you talk a lot about mentors, Mark Eden and Rick Bauman. How do you find mentors? And when you do find mentors, what is it, maybe questions that you ask them, or do you meet with them on a consistent basis, or how does that relationship look?
it's a great question, and I'm not really sure I have an answer specifically for me. I think it's just kind of, for me, it's first looking at the person and seeing what they've done in their career,
Sure.
and then getting to know them and having more of a personal connection. And I think it's important to have that personal connection, because if you don't get along with the person, how are they going to be your mentor, right? So you can respect the
Of
heck out of
course.
somebody and they can have the most impressive career ever, but if you can't talk to them, so
Of
what?
course.
So Rick and I were very close for a long time, and Mark and I still talk to this day. And over the years, I've just kind of come across people that I consider being mentor. I don't think I ever really call them out as like, you're my
Sure.
mentor. It's not
Sure.
like a formalized relationship, but it's somebody you can call or discuss things with, or whatever it is, or just chat, when you're frustrated or whatever, and they can give you
Right.
guidance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think mentors are so important. And I like to call it like a life hack. I've gone through food service myself for 7 or 8 years and kind of really grinding it out. But when I meet people like yourself, or other people that have, the movers and shakers out there, and I learn from them, I feel that the learning gap starts to close a lot, which is nice. And it makes it very helpful in trying to be successful and achieve my goals. And especially, I feel like in food service, at 29 right now, I started when I was 22, and every room that I'm always in, I'm always the youngest person. And so
Amen
if
to
I can,
that.
right? So if I can surround myself with others that have been there and done that, of what I want to accomplish, I feel like it really helps me out tremendously.
Yeah, and I think well, you also had a leg up. You had somebody by the name of John Portillo,
Yes,
that had a little bit of guidance. But I mean, I remember when you first started in the industry as well, because I think it's Amazon. We were one of your first brands,
correct.
and then you were kind of thrust into the leadership role. And
Yeah,
so, but you and I always had some great conversations. I remember I would stop by whatever random office. You were like working in like a shared office space or
that's
whatever, but
right. Tech space.
yeah, tech space, yeah. So,
Yeah,
but I would come up or whatever, and we would talk. We talk on the phone, but we talked more than just the product that we were working on. We talked more about food service and strategy and things like that.
totally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know in as your career has gone on, in 2010 you joined Gardein as their director of food service sales. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I was working at Kim and Scott's, and again, Rick had left there and gone to Gardein, and he reached out to me again, kind of in a similar situation, and was like, "Hey, I've got this new product that I think you'd really do well with," and he sent me like a screenshot or something, and I was like, I am not selling fake meat. Like, there's no way possible that because you have to remember back then there was no category. It was Morningstar, Linda,
Yeah,
Loma, like there was a couple of them, but the things that have been around, but nothing like this where it was actually designed to
sure.
look and taste like a piece of chicken. And I actually went out and bought some of it and called them, and I was like, "Yep, I'm on board," because the product was
Right.
really good. And that's one of the things I think that has helped me be really successful in my career is being fortunate enough to identify and recognize great products at the right time. Eve Potvin at Gardein used to say, we're riding a wave, and you surf too. So it's like if you're too far
Sure.
out in front of the wave breaks on your head. If you're too far behind, you miss it. If you're right where you need to be, you ride it down the line and you ride it as long as you can. And so I've been fortunate to come up or to be exposed to products like that. Yeah, so I interviewed with Gardein. It was a very interesting interview back then too. So I really started to feel like I knew a lot more about food service. And one of the things you run into in food service, especially when you work with most companies that are retail focused,
Hmm.
is that they have no idea what we do.
Right.
And the biggest watch out for me is, okay, they don't have any idea what we do. Will they listen if you tell them what you do? And then will they let you go do it without trying
Right.
to give you guidance? Because how can they guide you to how to do something that they don't know what it is?
Of
So
course.
I specifically remember interviewing with the recruiter at the time, and they were like, I basically had to explain what the industry was first, and then explain why I was a good fit for them within the industry. And it was very frustrating because I couldn't they were like beating me up over something they had no idea what they were talking about. I managed to get through that process, but
Are you saying that you were educating Gardein or the recruiter
at the
on the
time it
food
was the
services?
recruiter. At the time it
Ah,
was the
okay.
recruiter. By the time that was it was kind of a formality because I knew somebody there and whatnot. But then going into Gardein, it really they opened their eyes and they were willing to really look at the right way of doing things and whatnot.
Right.
So, but it still happens, right? You still end up inside an organization that's really focused on retail because that's what builds the brand initially, or can
Of
build the brand
course.
initially.
Of
And
course.
so you kind of become the tail of the dog, right? That's just like flapping of the
Yep.
reeds in the back end. But it was, it was meant to be. It was a very challenging role because we not only had this amazing product, but the category didn't really exist.
Sure.
Nobody knew what it was, and so trying to break into that was pretty challenging.
I bet. So you mentioned that you said you have the ability to identify great products at the right time. That's very profound. How is there a method, or is there tricks, or is there any? What do you look for when interviewing for a company in terms of how do you know if it's a great product and it's the right time?
Sure. With Gardein, it was well, even with Kim and Scotch or with Gardein and then Samazon, it's like you have to be in tune with what's going on in the world, in the food world in
Right.
particular, the world in general, and then the food world. And for me, looking at a product like Gardein and seeing like just the quality and the like, food has to taste good. And so I tried it
Sure.
and I'm like, this is amazing. I see the food system changing at that point. People were starting to talk about veganism, plant based didn't even exist back then. Nobody called it that. And it was weird because it was like either
Right.
you were a vegan, a vegetarian, or you had some kind of stupid label on you that like labeled you as like an
I
outsider,
remember that.
as opposed to just a person that
Yeah.
liked to eat plants, right? But I just looked at the space and I looked at what was going on, and I'm like, yep, this makes sense. So for Gardein, it
Sure.
was, we know that there's a problem in the world with too much meat consumption, whether it be health wise, whether it be planet impacts,
Yep.
or whether people just really are against the eating and treatment of animals, ethical treatment of animals and whatnot. So that was like it was, and then finding a great product alongside that, because for me, it's the product's always still got to be great. In fact, I
Sure.
really struggle to understand in this industry how some people sell products that they sell. Now I understand they've got a
Right.
family, so they have to like you gotta work, right? So I get that. I respect the hell out of
Of
that. I'm not
course.
criticizing anybody about that. You want to go sell French fries for a living? Go sell millions of pounds. Go for it, right? It's not me. I couldn't do it.
Exactly.
I really couldn't do it. I couldn't get out of bed. So I found an exciting product, good company, that's the thing too, is so now you've got a product that you love,
Hmm.
you've got in an industry that needs it, and you can be successful. I also like a challenge.
Totally.
Like, hey, let's go sell the first plant-based chicken out there to a world that knows no idea what it is. Sweet, that sounds like fun. Sign me up. And then the last part is really, and this is what I've really moved forward with my career is the team and the people that you work with. Because if you don't have a good team around you, or people that support you or whatnot, it can be very difficult to do that. So if you put those components
Yeah.
together, and it can be hard to recognize, but today where I'm sitting now with my mochi, or even where I was with Sambazon, it's like when I'm interviewing people to work with me on my team, and notice I never
Hmm.
say for me, because I think that's crap. I don't work for anybody,
Of
right? I
course.
work for myself. I love working with a team, but it's like it's okay, cool. I looked at your resume. You've got the requisite skill set. You've
Hmm.
got the energy, but let's have a conversation about whether or not you're going to fit into the team. Because the old adage is that one bad apple spoils the bunch, right? And so I've really
Of course.
worked hard at making sure that the team is cohesive, regardless of the skill set. Because let's face it, in food service, the people are out there. Now it might be challenging to
Of
find the right
course.
people, but you've got to find the right people that can work together as a team. So product, environment, challenge, and ultimately working in a good team are probably the top four things that I look for.
I love that. And then you mentioned Sambazon. So Sambazon is a very unique brand. And living in Southern California, it's I mean, we see it all over the place. The acai craze, and I know they were really the pioneers of bringing the acai berry from Brazil here to the United States. What were some of the lessons that you learned from your time at Sambazon?
Whew. I think, like anybody, you want to be a little bit ahead of your time. And so when I joined that organization,
Sure.
first of all, it was a funny conversation again with the recruiter, because the recruiter was trying to get me to work for some supplement company in Chicago. And I was like, and I knew the recruiter that I was talking to, and I was like, what are you talking? Like, how does this sound like me? And like anything I would want to touch
Right.
based on my career. And he goes, well, you're a surfer, right? I go, yeah. He goes, what do you know about Sambazon? I go, the acai company. I go, that stuff's
Yeah.
crap. It's loaded with sugar, right? And
Yeah.
he's like, well, maybe you should go
Yeah.
talk to them, right? And so I didn't know anything about it. Again, like I kind of just stumbled into it. I knew it was everywhere. I knew how to pronounce it, unlike a lot of people, which was
Sure.
nice.
Yeah, yes.
So, um, but I went and Gardein had just sold to Pinnacle Foods. I did not want to work for a large corporation like that at all,
Right.
and that's nothing against them. It's just not my cup of tea. So I had the opportunity to meet with Ryan Black, the CEO at Amazon, and
Hmm.
Travis, and some great people over there. And again, it was like I looked at where I'd taken Gardein, college and university, the non-commercial space, and I'm like, man, this is a layup, because the students are going to love this story, which is a great story.
Right.
Protecting the rainforest, protecting the Amazon, and providing fair wages, taking a product that they would normally just consume and having it such that these people now can utilize it to, stay on their native land. They don't have to sell it to agribusiness and things like
Yeah.
that. I'm like, this is awesome. Like I get to go save the planet. Holy crap. And the
Right.
product's really good. And I was educated about the product and sugar and all that, and so I changed my mind. It actually is really good for you and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so it was. So that was the first part of it, was just like getting in the door and seeing it, and then I think probably the worst thing that I did was I wanted to be ahead of where I was, meaning
Okay.
like I got hired as a vice president, and for all intents and purposes, I really didn't have the right experience to be a vice president at that point,
Right.
which I thought I did, but obviously I
I,
didn't.
I mean, in working with you, I thought you did a fantastic job.
Well, I appreciate that. But but still, there's the sales component of it, and then
Sure.
there's the business management and things like that, which I didn't have the experience in, and so that was probably a big watch out. But I also spoke up a lot, and
Hmm.
when I first started there, I think you probably remember there were some other people working, and
Yeah.
the company had done a great job building bowl shops and smoothie shops across the country. They were facing some challenges from competition that was undercutting
Sure.
them on price. We had a machine that we wanted to get out there and make bowls on demand.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't speaking the same language. So I'm talking about non-commercial. I'm talking about college and university, going to things like NACUFs, right? Um, Going to
Yeah.
NRA, and I think I don't remember if it was at Gardein or if it was at Sambazon, and somebody was like, "We're not doing NRA. Nothing happens there." And I was like, "What are you talking
Right.
about? Like, how are you in the food business selling to food service customers? You don't go to the National Restaurant Show." And so for people who
Right.
aren't in the food industry, NRA is not the other NRA. This is the National Restaurant Association.
Of
But
course.
yeah, so I mean, I remember when you went to your first one, right? Or at least when you came.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where you go to see what's going on with trends and connect with people and things like that. And so
Absolutely.
you've got to. It was making it relevant. And what I told the people at Sam Design at the time was like, look, I'm here to make you and turn you into a professional food service organization, as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to a couple of people out on the street doing deals with like individual distributors, giving them exclusivity. Like exclusivity is a 4-letter word in my world, right? I want to
Right.
sell to as many points of distribution as possible, give the operator access to the product anywhere they want to buy it from. And
Sure.
so
That makes
really
sense.
started speaking that language and building out a team that could then go facilitate that and move forward.
Of course. And it seems like from your time at Gardein to your time at Sambazon, you really went from, I don't want to say zero, but it was maybe minimal sales and just exploded it out. I know at Sambazon, you went from what, five or so, a handful distributors up to almost 400 different points of distribution.
Mm-hmm.
In food service, what we see on the broker side is that, kind of pioneering is what we call it, kind of taking a brand from zero to hero. It's the most expensive. It takes the most amount of time. It's very difficult. And if you don't have the right pieces in play, it's almost impossible to get it off the ground. That distribution point really is a sticking point in food service because you have to have relationships there. They have to stock the product and so on and so forth. So you say that you really zoned in on those college and universities and non-commercial accounts. Did you feel like those were kind of the drivers into distribution, or why did you focus on those two segments specifically?
Sure. I mean, 100% focusing on college and universities. It's the product fits. We know that for especially for Guardian or for Sambazon or even at my
Right.
Mochi now, the
Right.
product fits, right? The students, they're looking for these products.
Right.
From the Sambazon standpoint, they're looking for something that's sustainable. They want vision into where their food comes from. Students are a lot
Sure.
smarter. Well, your generation is a lot smarter than my generation, and probably the one before it. Um, you don't have any gray in your hair or in your beard yet. Can you even grow a beard yet? I
None.
don't know. Okay.
No, I can get some peach fuzz going here.
But seriously, it's the right product for the right space. But
Sure.
it's also, and you know this from your work that you do, you need that anchor account to drive
Right.
distribution, and that's really been my model. And I don't think it's anything unique to me,
Right.
but I really focused on it over my career and really focused on let's get a couple anchor accounts that drive distribution, and then let's go exploit that distribution. So, say you're
Sure.
working with a broadliner, they have the contract with USC, so US Foods, right? So they have USC.
Right.
So now I'm selling to USC. They're selling enough product to keep the lights on for us, through that distributor. The distributor's happy. Okay, let's go talk to the distributor about who else we can sell to. Let's
Right.
go. Let's go implement a marketing program, and that's kind of the process you go through, and over and over again, which is fine when you're close to where your manufacturing and distribution point is. It gets to be more of a challenge when you're trying to go across the country, and that's where, as we mentioned earlier, Dot Foods comes in, or Redistributor. Dot's the big dog in town.
Sure.
So it can be a bit of a challenge with them because it's a circular thing, which is chicken or the egg. You're not big enough for Dot to pick up because they wanted, I don't know, a truckload a month or something like that. So
Of
they won't
course.
work with you. But in order for you to get big enough, you need to work with them.
Of course.
And that's changed a lot with them as well. They've really, I mean, their business has exploded because they're pretty much the only game in town. But yeah, so focusing on those large volume customers that can really drive volume, force distribution on a regional level. And then if you can show it regionally, you just repeat it. So if we did it in Southern California, let's go do it in NorCal. Let's go to Pacific Northwest.
Hmm.
And then once I was able to, or my team was able to drive that and force distribution, let's go hire a broker now that can go exploit it. And to your point, pioneering, I never really want my broker to pioneer because
Sure.
I should be doing that, right? It should be me and my team owning the brand, going out, and then otherwise you're just going to spin your wheels. You don't want to. You don't have time to go to
Hmm.
the operator, go to the distributor, back to the operator, back to the distributor. All this back and forth. Instead, what you and your team need to be able to do is say,
Sure.
okay, here's the 6 distributors you're stocked at. It's open coded. We know our customers in the area where we think this is going to fit. Let's go. And that's really the way
Sure.
to do it. I can't tell you how many people I've come across that ask me for advice on brokers and who do you hire. And all I just ask them, like, do you have any distribution? They're like, no. I'm
Right.
like, well, don't hire a broker. You're going to feel like that they don't do anything, and
Right.
you're going to be upset about it, and you're not going to get anywhere. And that's just happens too many times. So it's like, you got to at least break into a market before
Sure.
you bring somebody on.
So when you started with these brands, it's kind of you get it up to some sort of initial level, and then you fill out your broker team. Do you start with direct reps first, or do you do it yourself, or how does that, or do you do brokers first? Sometimes, I mean, is there a formula that works for you, or what are the metrics that you look at in terms of growing companies?
Yeah, I think for me, the formula that has worked has been doing what we're talking about, which is going out, driving some big distribution, partnering with a company, like, partnering with somebody on that can really force a distribution. I prefer to bring in direct sales force initially.
Okay.
You can't. I don't think. Yeah, I think you got to be careful. I don't think you can. I don't think that people are always just the answer. More people, more people, more people.
Hmm.
It's still an overall strategy. And so up until my mochi, which is where I'm at now, I would say with products that are back of the house that I've worked with, ingredient products, that model seems to work pretty well.
Sure.
Get some initial sales, get some initial distribution, hire some direct people, and then once you have them settled in, then they can work with the broker and whatnot. I mean, the other thing is if there's, I think when I was at Gardein, I had 14 different brokers that I called on in my
Wow.
region, right? And that's just, I mean, there's not enough weeks in a quarter to go see them.
Right.
And the same thing with my counterpart. And we were like, then the great broker consolidation happened, and it kind of helped things out a little bit. But
Right.
my point there is that you you can't have like one rep trying to rep the whole country, or one rep. And I see this over and over again. And it's like,
Yeah.
man, if and this goes back to people not understanding the industry. You can't do it. You can't be like one person trying to manage a business across the country. You'll
It's a
kill
lot to
yourself.
ask.
It's just
Yeah.
way too much.
Yeah.
So that being said, moving into my mochi, which is more of a front of the house brand, a retail brand. I mean, for all
Yeah.
intents and purposes, it's a retail food service product. My whole philosophy changed a little bit, and
Sure.
this is where I think that having an engineering or a scientific background comes into
Hmm.
play. It's being able to look at all the moving parts on the chessboard, or whatever you want to say, and being able to react to change, being able to quickly move forward in different directions, read the data and move forward, and then reassess and go forward again. If you have to take a step back, you can.
Sure.
And so I started with my mochi and started kind of down that path.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not working. Like within the
Right.
month, I was like, broadliners, everybody's messed up from the pandemic.
Hmm.
And so we took a little bit of different approach, where we decided to invest and partner with Compass Food Buy and Chartwells, which
Okay.
is which is something totally different. So now you're partnering with a large, contract management company, and specifically in the
Hmm.
segment that you want to target. And we used that to really move distribution forward on a national scale, but through a distributor I'd never worked with, through Vistar, which is a
Right.
vending distributor. So I had to learn that side of the business, still learning it. But good people over there that have been mentoring me, but working with Andrew Green at Chartwells, just being a
Sure.
champion of the product. And I think the way we've done it with my mochi, which is different than what I've done previously, or my teams have done previously, other companies, is that my mochi decided to forward invest. Uh, and I think that's something, I think is interesting, in that a lot of companies that are in retail will say they want to get into food service. So they want to hire one person, maybe kind of try it out and see what happens. And I'm like, yeah, not interested. Right. It's
Right.
like, if you're not going to spend the money to go into it and be serious about it, it's going to be a tremendous waste of time. And so we invested in this business heavily, and that's why we've been able to be so successful so quickly.
Looking at your past experience and now My Mochi, what is the support level that My Mochi gives you, maybe that is unique to others? Yeah, I know you're mentioning kind of maybe the forward investing, but can you maybe go a little bit deeper into that and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think we're in a unique situation with My Mochi in that uh, we have they really they siloed their business. So they started out in retail with a
Sure.
great brand, and just blew up. I mean, if you guys aren't familiar, I'm like, have you not been in a grocery store in the last 5 years? I mean, it's everywhere. Where do you live? Under a rock? I mean, come on. Like, so, but they really hit the market, but they invested heavily. They invested in freezers. They had the mochi bars. And so they came on the scene and they were like, I always say, like, when I started with My Mochi, it's going to be one day My Mochi doesn't exist in food service. The next day we're going to be freaking everywhere. And it's
Right.
happened. So they did that on the retail side. Then they went to the mass, right? So Target, Walmart. And at one point, and I don't know if I can be quoted on this, but at one point during some time frame at Target, we were the number one selling frozen novelty, which is
I
huge
believe it.
because you're competing against. Look at some of the brands you're competing against.
Yeah.
Nestle, right? Which, by the way, is a funny anecdote when you talk about the big older brands.
Hmm.
Somebody was talking to me the other day, and their daughter, who's in college now, but at the time when they saw this product, they were like, "Dad, what's Nestle?"
Right.
Right? Like, kids don't know what Nestle is anymore.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't
Isn't that
exist.
something?
It's,
Right.
so I bet you they know what My Mochi is. So they did a great job of building that brand. And then when I
Sure.
started, we had Trey, who's Trey Whaley, who was
Yep.
there
I
before
know
me.
Trey.
Yep, and Trey's fantastic. And he actually knows the vending side of the business better than I do. So we became a really good, strong partnership there, strategically, and then with his execution and his people that he knows. Um, and then after we started kind of getting a little bit of success, Sandra and Craig came to me and they're like, "Yo, what can we do to move faster?" And I was like, "I think I need to hire a couple people." And that's what we ended up doing. So we ended up hiring Brandon and Will. Sorry to Sambazon because they came over from there, but it was time for them to make a move. And But again, that teamwork, right? You know your team, and I knew they would all work together. And now I've got one of the best teams out there again with Trey, Brandon, and Will, and we're actually bringing a new person on in a couple of
That's
weeks.
fantastic.
But just that, like, we had zero, like, for all intents and purposes, after the first 2 months, we still had like zero sales. And so
Right.
now they hired me. They brought in Brandon. They brought in Will. They invested in a partnership with Chartwells. So they're and not to mention that we have freezers, right? We have merchandising.
Sure.
So we have 1,000 freezers that we can use this year. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? So they're
That
investing
is
in the business to play it forward. And I think that was a little bit different than where I've been in the past, where they've really been so focused on retail that they know they need food service, but they're not really sure
right.
that they want to invest in it. And they have different investors, venture capital investors that are looking to cash out quickly. Food service can be a little bit longer, slow burn, especially to become profitable when you're forward spending. So I don't know that either philosophy is right or wrong.
Sure.
I think we're getting there a lot faster with My Mochi, but I also think I had the benefit of 5 more years experience that I didn't have with Samazon, right? To
Of
show how
course.
we could do it. So, I can move forward faster now. And my network has grown and all those sorts of things. And so,
Totally.
yeah.
You mentioned, you went from the back of the house world to the front of the house. What are some of the uniqueness about the front of the house, and what are some of the challenges and learnings you've had from now going into that part of the operation?
You should ask Brandon and Will that question. So I was fortunate enough to work on the retail side a little bit, at least when I was with Folgers, and then actually at OnTech as well. So I understand enough of the retail business to be
Right.
dangerous, and I did some convenience store work as well. So basically, we're working inside a retail environment, but within food service. So the language
Okay.
is different. How do you project volume, and it's units per week, things like that. But it's just a little bit different. The
Sure.
distribution model can be a little bit different.
Sure.
Using we have a DSD network across the country for My Mochi that really delivers into C stores and whatnot, and they overlap a little bit with college and university. I thought we should focus on broadline. That wasn't exactly the case to start out, so we partnered. Vistar was really the way we started going. So it's just a different environment. And then for brokers, uh, like for your team, do they know those people
Right.
inside what you're trying to do? So do they know the persons that's running the C stores on campus, or do they know the chef that's running culinary or whatever it is? It's so what are the relationships there?
That's
So
interesting.
fortunately for me with a lot of the colleges, and I'll talk a lot about colleges because that's where I spend a lot of time.
Right.
But I know enough of the people at the top levels to say, hey, who do I talk to on the retail side? Or how do
Mhm.
we partner here to make this successful? Now, that's not to say we're not doing things from a back of the house standpoint. It's just not as big a focus. Me and Trey and Brandon were just at Michigan State with Chef Kurt Kwiatkowski. Yep, I can pronounce that. And Kurt's great. I've known Kurt for a long time. But Kurt brought us in, and we were at the club level of their football stadium for homecoming, and we had plated up my mochi desserts as opposed to just single sample. So
Okay.
we're still doing stuff like that. But it is a lot different. So it's basically more about just turns and transactions, and then a whole other space is working with hotels. So we're in the Hampton Inn
Hmm.
Suites. Sorry, Homewood Suites. That's my bad. Homewood Suites by Hilton, and the velocity that you see there, it's not very fast moving, but just the scale of it, you're in 380 of them. Or if you can get into 1,000 Marriotts, right? It's like, oh, you may only sell 2 mochi balls a day per flavor,
Sure.
but over 1,000 units, that's a real lot. Versus at Sambazon, we were selling 25 tubs of acai a day out of one location,
Right.
right? With $100 ring on that tub. So it's just totally different. So now I find us going after a lot larger opportunities for,
Hmm.
so for scale. So going after those multi-unit places on the non-commercial side that can still move a lot of volume.
You mentioned that you brought over Will and Brandon from your previous life at Sambazon. When you're looking at talent, there's a difference between someone who can, go into a kitchen and work with a chef. Maybe it's a mom and pop operation, 1 to 3 units, but you're talking about going after Homewood Suites that has 380 locations. I mean, that is a whale. When you profile your team, do they have to have the ability to speak or be comfortable with those types of large accounts, or is it something that you teach? How does that usually work?
I'd say, I mean, in this specific instance, I have all the confidence in the world that these guys can do that.
Yes.
But I'm probably going to be in the room to start out.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so, and I think I was having this conversation with Will the other day, because I tend to take over, and it's a bad habit that I have. When I go into a meeting with one of the regional directors, I don't. Let's face it, I don't get to sell a lot anymore. I sit behind the computer and do strategy and spreadsheets and stuff like that.
Right.
And so when I get out of that selling environment, I'm like super excited, like Tommy Boy, right?
Right.
And so I'm gonna go sell brake pads. So I tend to take over a little bit. But Will and I were talking about the other day, and he mentioned something where it was like, yeah, but I get to see how you do it, and it also tells the people in the room that you trust me enough
Hmm.
to bring me into the conversation, and I think that's important too. So, there are certain things, and after we do calls like that or whatnot, I'll always say, hey, let's talk a little bit about opportunities during that call, things you could have done a little bit differently, things you did well. I think you
Sure.
still need to coach. I think people forget about that a lot, especially with younger talent and sales. It's like I still need coaching every once in a while. So I critique myself most of the time. Like I could have done this better after the call. I'm kind of like,
Right.
I should have done this, should have done that. Shower thoughts, right?
Of course.
Like after somebody cuts you off and you're driving down the street, you're like, I wish I would have said this. Um, but I think, yeah. So I knew that they could handle that, but it's just giving them the opportunity as well, right? It's like I, I never liked it when I was at a company and they didn't trust that I could do that.
Right.
Right. And so they just wouldn't bring me, oh, no, we're going to close the door now and you can go over there. And I'm like, oh, but I brought the deal here,
Right.
and what that really is about empowerment. And so what I try to do with my team is empower them in those meetings to make the decision. So I've got to get the sign off from the top down that says, hey, you guys got to trust us enough that we're going to have to make some decisions on the fly. Give us some
Yeah.
confines within the financial world that makes sense that we can
Yeah.
do that. Trust us right? That word trust is big. Trust us to make the right
Hmm.
choice in that meeting. And I trust all three of these guys to do that all the time.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's as leadership, when you bring in an A player or a high performing individual, they have to have the latitude to make decisions, and you're right, have that trust and belief that they're going to get the job done. I think a lot of times if you squeeze those A players or micromanage them or whatever it may, or don't give them tools to be successful in the support, they may end up leaving or finding other opportunities elsewhere. Where is
Yeah, that they get frustrated. I always say, don't hire smart people and then tell them what to do.
I like that. That is a great quote.
Right. Yeah.
When you look at My Mochi today, where are you at, and what are the next levels on the food service side for My Mochi?
Well, we're going like 1,000 miles per hour right now. It's like I feel like I've been here for like 4 years already, and I've only been here since March. And
Right.
again, it's because we've had the support that, I mean, I did a podcast like a month ago. And on the
Sure.
podcast, I talked about how we were in 120 colleges. Well, by the time the podcast came out, like 3 weeks later, we were in like 200 colleges.
Wow.
So it was like, that's the speed we're moving at. And so we're expanding quickly, and that doesn't always necessarily mean people.
Hmm.
Um, right now, for us, I think we need to build out some more infrastructure around sales, around marketing, around internal support, just having systems in place. I'm not huge on being like overly system driven, but you do
Hmm.
need some basics there, and so we're going to expand on that. I saw that really within the um, non-commercial space and working with these GPOs, these contract management companies, I could spend the time myself and going and really getting in deep whatnot. Instead, I found somebody who's an A player, as you mentioned, and that
Hmm.
person starts in a week. So it's like
Wow.
my again, Sandra and Craig, my CSO, my CEO, were like, hey, what do you think we should do? Like, let's sit down. After literally within like 3 or 4 months, they're like, hey, we met with the board. What
Sure.
can we do to move this faster? Do you need more people? I'm like, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we need 10 people across the country selling, but wow, like a national account specialist that specializes in non-commercial.
Mm.
Yes, let's go do that so that they can walk in and have these conversations at the top to top level with these organizations. And then I'll be there as well. And then we'll start to really build that out. We might be looking to hire like a chain specialist, because
Yep.
when you try to work with local, regional, national chains, it's really a full-time job for one person, if
Sure.
not more. Maybe expanding into a broker network, but the longer you wait to approach chains, the longer it takes.
Right.
Right? It's like they have menu cycles, they might be running an LTO or whatever, but if you don't start now, then you might be out of the rotation for a whole other year.
Right.
So we're looking at that. We're looking at continued growth in non-commercial. So what we've really done is we set our sights on three segments specifically. We set college and
Okay.
university, BNI, and healthcare. Healthcare kind of fell by the wayside because we were having so much success in college and university, and we're testing in BNI. So what I like to do is make sure you get out into some segments, get out into the world and figure out what's going on. And then once you see something that's working, go hammer it.
Sure.
So that's what we did with college university. We're starting to do that with BNI. BNI is coming back uh, very quickly.
In
And
a big way.
so, yeah, so we have an opportunity there. We're going to have another opportunity with healthcare, and then randomly K through 12. So in my past life, my products
Interesting.
either didn't exist. So Gardein, like when I talked to the School Nutrition Association, they're like, what is this? It doesn't
Yes.
fit anywhere on inside, it's not ketchup or whatever, right? As a
Right.
vegetable. But it's, and by the way, I'll just say it here, like it's unfortunate that we don't spend more money on our child nutrition.
Right.
But anyway, Gardein didn't really exist. There was no category. So it
Hmm.
didn't fit within the child nutrition labeling requirements back then. Samazon was just too expensive. And people were like, why is it so expensive? I'm like, have you seen the person climb the tree in Brazil with a machete and cut the comb off and everything? And then they got to put it in a basket that goes on a canoe to a boat. I'm like, just the supply chain alone makes it expensive. So
Oh,
unfortunately,
absolutely.
we're not in the business of nonprofit. So the product was a little too expensive for K through 12.
Hmm.
Turns out that my mochi isn't too expensive for K through 12, and it's a good pre-portioned snack, right? So it's not something that's like massive and too many calories and all these things. It's just a 100-calorie ice cream ball with dough on it, right? And it's delicious, or as we say, disquicious.
Just
And
squishes.
we were initially kind of dissuaded from going after K through 12 because we weren't what's called Smart Snack approved. And I am by no means an expert in any of this. I'm sure in your office you have somebody who is a K through 12 specialist that's
Yeah, we
probably
have a
been in the
K-12
industry.
team. Yeah,
Yeah, they've probably been in the industry for about like 20 years too, 30 years. That
correct.
they understand the bid process. I don't. I've never done it because my products
Yeah.
didn't fit in. Well, now they do. So we started going to some of these shows, and some of the best shows we've been to in Texas, they allow the high school students to come in and vote for what they want. Well, shoot, Trey was down in Texas like a couple of weeks ago. He had 1,000 individual samples, and he was out in an hour. So guess
That's
what? They want our product.
crazy. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
and people are like, I don't care that it's not Smart Snack approved. We want to give the kids what they want. And
Right.
by the way, it's easy. We don't have to scoop ice cream. It's pre-portioned. It's small enough. And wait till we launch our next products, which are smoothie bites. So basically, imagine
Okay.
my mochi ice cream ball, but instead in the center, it's a smoothie. And so
Ooh, I
think about
love
how
that.
that's going to, yeah, and we're changing day parts. So now we're going from a midday to an afternoon snack to breakfast. So, and I think that's going to play out really well in K through 12. So there's the whole idea of maximizing your opportunity with existing products, but then innovation. And so this innovation on this side is
Hmm.
now getting us into a whole other day part.
Yeah.
Gardein, the reason they were successful, innovation. Eve and his team, they make great products. But I remember one day he went to Trader Joe's and he asked them what their number one selling frozen entree was, and it was their orange chicken. He took the bag, took pictures of it, emailed it to his team, and within like 3 weeks, we had a Gardein orange chicken that was phenomenal. But
Wow.
it's that kind of innovation that really drives things forward. And so with my
Yeah.
mochi, the support on the equipment side, the people side, the personnel side, but then all of a sudden this amazing innovation as well. And who knows where we go from here? But I can tell you that these smoothie bites are going to go crazy out in this space, especially K through 12. So we're really excited about that.
When for a manufacturer, a lot of times they view new innovation maybe as it might be more profitable items, or you might have a customer already. You're trying to increase the amount of items that they buy from you, and so these new smoothie bites, you're changing day parts. What what are some strategies that you or tactics that you use to introduce new innovation into the market? It can be expensive, and I think there's a lot of frustration on the manufacturing side where they have this great idea and maybe it falls short.
Yeah, and if you're a manufacturer and you're listening, remember a couple of things. One, if you make a great product and put it in a package, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean it's ready to launch.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, just because it's manufactured and sitting in the warehouse actually doesn't. It means it's not ready to launch. You need the support behind it, and you need a strategy and a way to launch this product. And then I'm talking about food service. In retail, it's a little bit more straightforward.
Mhm.
But in food service, you got to have a strategy in place. You got to have the tools in place. We were just on a call today with my team, going over a checklist of things that we need to figure out before we launch this product, because we have it. It's ready to go. We can make it, but I need sell sheets. First of all, we need to decide what segments we want to go after as a team. Once we decide those segments, then it's like, okay, let's make sure that we've got our proper sell sheets. We've got our blocking and tackling. We've got our sell sheets. We've
Mhm.
got our presentations. Do we have our broker training set up? Because so we need to go out and talk to them. Do we have? Can we get product? Can we get numbers from Dot? Can we
Mhm.
get numbers from? Can we get SUPCs set up at Cisco? Can we get APMs from US Foods so that we've got everything in play and we've got everything ready to go? So it's just really all that support that you need, and then think about from a marketing standpoint. Okay, how are we going to merchandise this? Are we going to put it in the same freezers as our ice cream? Do we need signage now here? Now, let's try our new smoothie bites. There's that side of it. Are we going to invest in any media where we want to announce it to the trade? Are we going to pick a specific trade show to announce it to the trade, whatever.
Right.
So there's all these different things that you got to think about. And I think a lot of times manufacturers are like, here's the box, go
Yep.
sell it. And it's
Yep.
like, and I know you run into that as a
We do.
broker all the time.
Yes.
They're like, well, we got a box of stuff in it, go sell it. And you're like, no. That's, oh, and let's
Correct.
not forget, let's make sure we have the price. Like, what does it cost? Like, let's make sure we got a price sheet
Yep.
together, spec
Yep.
sheet, so we can get all that stuff set up. And just making sure that you have all those basic things in place to start out. And for us, because we're ultimately going to compete in a retail space, we need data that says you should buy
Mm-hmm.
this over something else. And fortunately, we have retail data, which helps us a lot. So if we didn't have our partners on the retail side, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Because,
Yeah.
in the food service industry, we don't get a lot of really good data.
Yeah, that's one thing that's missing in our industry. It's we are very relationship driven, but I know in retail they have so many different, or so much more information and data as opposed to food service, and I think that goes a long way. Especially when you're trying to yeah, introduce a new innovation or new product, you want to know, hey, maybe what are the data points of being successful in this channel or that channel.
Oh, and then I also recommend that as a sales team, you try the product. You'd be surprised how often, like, somebody gets a product and they get ready to launch, and the team's like, I haven't even tried
Yeah,
it yet. Have you launched it? Right? So it's
right.
make sure they try the product and they get behind it as well. Now, I tried it and it's fantastic. Not that they needed my stamp of approval, but it makes it a lot easier if it is, if it's there.
Totally. I don't know if you're familiar with Zig Ziglar, but he has in one of
Yeah.
his books, he tells a story of he was the number one sales person at a Tupperware company, and there was a struggling salesperson that said, "Zig, can you help me? How do I get to your level?" And he said, "Let me come over to your house." So he goes over to the house and he finds that the guy doesn't even have any of the Tupperware in his own home. He doesn't use it
Yep.
himself. And he said, "How can you really believe in it?" So I think definitely trying the product and believing in it and using it at home, and it really goes a long way. It separates, maybe the good from the great. It's taking that one
Yep.
extra little step.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people out there that might be a regional sales manager or in some sort of mid-level management, and they want to get to the next level. They want to become a director of food service like you have been, or a vice president of some sort. What is maybe a one nugget or two that you would say or you would recommend to others? What is maybe some advice that you would give to somebody that wants to break through, cut through all the noise and get to that next level?
Yeah, I think you need to speak up. So, and you need to find an organization that is willing to develop you or develop
Sure.
talent. I think a lot of times with smaller startup companies, they don't have time to really develop talent. So they're trying to hire talent, and then that's kind of it. There's really nowhere for them to go. So you've got to move either laterally or up outside the organization, which kind of stinks if you really like where you're working and there's nowhere for you to go. But it's having that conversation, making sure that you pick the right management team around you to say, hey,
Right.
like, before I come work here, I want to see what my path looks like, my career path. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that I've necessarily had that in my career, which is why I've moved from, I spent probably about 5 or 6 years with the company, and then I
Right.
moved on to somewhere else if there was no opportunity there. So, but I think that's important. I also think, and this could be difficult for people that are kind of midway through their career, but I like the balance of having a large corporate background from a Procter and Gamble. Even though I wasn't on the sales side, it was still just understanding how to structure things and how, P&G's huge, but they still had really effective teams and they had clear plans to promotional paths and things like that. And so having that as somewhere in your career, I think is a really good idea. And then whether or not you fit into that, I don't
Hmm.
necessarily fit into that field. But having that experience and then going to work somewhere small and recognizing you're not going to have those resources, and then you've got to really go do everything yourself. But then it's that having that experience, but then it's also just sitting and listening and learning and knowing as much as you can and the knowledge that you can pull together. And then remember that once you make the jump from like a regional salesperson to even a director and then into more of a VP role, you probably aren't going to get to do the stuff you like as much anymore if you really
Right.
like sales.
Right.
So it's a challenge. I still like getting on the road, but I have other responsibilities now, and so it's just really understanding, do you want to have to build the budget, and do you want to have to focus on all those sorts of things, which is fine for me. I like data and analysis and whatnot, but
Right.
so I think all that combined. But and then finding a mentor, as you talked about,
Hmm.
whether it's within your organization or outside your organization, but just putting yourself out there and showing that you can do it. And like, if you read any of the like management books and whatnot, it's doing the job that you want as opposed to doing the job that you're in. sort of
I love
thing. That stuff all it's still true. I mean, there's no like magic bullet behind it. If you're acting at a level above where you are, then you should be able to move up to that level.
that. Absolutely. And then one day, when you look back on your career, what do you want to be remembered for?
Oh boy, wow.
This one's
Um,
going to make you go deep here.
yeah, seriously. Honestly, all the products and everything else aside. I want to be remembered for developing talent and really being there for my team and showing them and helping them get to the next level and raise up. I think in our industry, and you and I have talked about this. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm young, so you're like really young,
Right.
and so there wasn't a lot of I mean, for whatever reason, there wasn't a lot of younger people that kept coming into the pipeline. And so I want to take that younger talent, develop them into the next generation and bring new ideas and fresh ideas and shake things up a little bit. And so ultimately, when I look back, I want people talking about me saying, hey, you know what? That guy really helped me out, gave me a leg up and really,
Right.
help my family and myself be successful. That for me would be absolutely fantastic.
I love that. Thaddeus, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time, and I know we went longer than we expected, but I think there was just so many great nuggets in this conversation, and I can't thank you enough. If someone wanted to reach out to you or hear more, how would they get in contact with you?
Probably the best way is to hit me up on LinkedIn and just do a direct message.
Okay.
I'm on there pretty frequently. Yeah, I won't give out my personal phone number just yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Thaddeus, thank you so
No.
much. Again, truly appreciate it.